Hi, I'm L'Oreal Moondagger. I'm the current Kingdom Regent of the Desert Winds, and we're a very widespread kingdom which can make travel very difficult and nearly impossible to do in the winter. So I decided to create a series of tutorials in order to bring the arts and sciences to you, no matter where you are. So I hope you enjoy watching and learn a little something too.
Okay, so here I've set up a spray-in station covering all the other equipment that I have laying around. Normally I would do this outside during the summertime. However, it's wintertime right now and it's way too cold and the Plastidip tends to freeze up in the can, so I have to keep it indoors. So I'm in my workshop, going to be spraying out. I'm using a respirator, Harbor Freight Special, 18 bucks or something like that. So that's why you can't hear me very well. So we're going to use, first off, the spray can of Plastidip. Comes in 11-ounce cans, Lowe's, Home Depot, a couple other specialty stores like Ace Hardware and whatnot. Get the black, it's easiest to do with. I've already got one can started, so I'm going to use it. Just like spray paint, you want to stay about 4 to 6 inches away from it. Cover the entire surface. We're going to do this whole side first, let it dry, and then turn it over, do the back side, let it dry, and then we can do the paint on version. So I'm coming in, since the heraldry is sticking up, I'm coming in at an angle so that I can get the sides and the bottom edges of that heraldry. And come up from the top too and make sure you got it. Although the can doesn't like to be sprayed that direction. Now very carefully, what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to take, reach around and grab the back side and turn it up on its edge. Oop, the extra random string that's hanging down from my, and set it here. And I don't know if you can see that, but there's still some unsprayed edges. Put my mask back on. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to spray around the outside edge and get the first coat on that taken care of. Rotate it around. And now we let that dry probably 3 or 4 hours before we come back and do the next coat. And the next coat will be, again, turning it over, spray the back side so we've got it completely covered in spray. Now the reason we cover it in spray first is because it will accept the DAP, or the paint-on version of the Plastidip, much better and much more evenly coated if you first start with a can of spray. So again, the can of spray will also get into all the little areas, especially if you've got heraldry coming. It'll get down into those little cracks so that you can get the Plastidip initially coated in and soaking in. It's also a thinner version, so it's going to adhere into the microcell of the foam a little bit better and grab onto it. So we do that layer first. Once the whole thing is covered completely and has basically got one full coating of the rubberized Plastidip, then we can do the extra layers, and we'll do 3 to 4 coats of the paint-on version. And in between each coat, we do a quick spray of this, of the spray, because it has a lot of the thinning agent in it, and it will help the paint version self-level and be good. So we'll give it a couple hours till this is done and be right back. Thanks. Now we're gonna get the back side. And then we let that dry. Okay, so here we are the following day. I've got some decent sunshine, so I'm going to do this outside. We're going to actually start taking with our Plastidip paint version. I'm using a 2-inch foam paintbrush. I've stirred this up. I just finished coating another shield, so I'm already halfway through this can. What we're going to do is we're just going to liberally, go in first over the cymbal area and make sure I get down into all the grooves right along the edges. And it's just gooping it on there for the first part. Make sure I get it all into all the cracks and crevices along the line. DAP will self-level to some, or Plastidip, sorry, I keep saying DAP. Plastidip will self-level to a certain extent, but when you get into areas, I don't know if you can see this up here, where I've got the feathers in that area, you want to make sure you get back into there, but then pull some of that back out using your brush. Because if you leave too much in there and it puddles up in there, when it dries, you'll end up with some deep air pockets. The skin will finally peel away and break out. So I'm just going to, you know, kind of move some of it away from that area so that it doesn't puddle up inside that detail work too much, and then work it back down onto the flat. I want to make sure that I use the edge of the brush to work the Plastidip down into all the grooves that I've cut out with that wood burning tool. I don't just want to let it puddle over the top, or you'll have air pockets in there that as the Plastidip dries, it will form little pockets of air that will pop. So I'm just going back over, since I've got lots of detail work here, I want to make sure I don't get too many big bubbles of stuff there. That's one thing to keep in mind when you're doing your heraldry or your whatever symbol you're going to do, to try to keep it as simple as possible without too many extra crevices and holes and whatnot in there. It'll just make the overall piece look better if you don't end up having a bunch of air pockets in your product afterwards. Maybe this will allow me to show you what I'm talking about. I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the video or not. You see how I've got all this puddling right here? You don't want to leave it like that because it's going to dry up. You want to leave it a little bit more like this, where you've worked it out. So what I've done there is I've come down with the edge of my brush and pulled some of that extra Plastidip back down and out of there. Especially, you see how I have that little hole right there up in the shoulder. I'm going to pull that back down so I don't leave big bunches of Plastidip. But I also want to make sure that I have enough in there that it's going to form a good bond around the seal. And I pull that back out. Down to the end of the can, pull a bunch of this out. Okay, and that's about it for that can, so I'm going to go grab another one. Okay, so here I've got a fresh can of Plastidip, the paint on version. Save the cap if you don't think you're going to use the entire can the first time. Has a nice convenient pop top. Now these cans, when they first start off, have a lot of, I believe it's called toluene, the thinning agent that's inside it. And that will rise to the top. So you want to take a stir rod and mix it up really good so that it gets all that thinning agent. Otherwise your first few strokes are just going to be pretty much full toluene, which will react to the DAP that's underneath the foam that you've held those foam layers together with. So get it all nice and mixed up there. And I take the stirring rod and rub off all that extra onto it. You can tell I've used it for a while. It's kind of built up a bit. Then we grab our brush. I'm going to pull all that off. Now I'm going to be very careful not to get too much on my brush, because I'm going to start going around the outside edge. You generally want to put 2 to 3 coats, depending upon the game that you're going to be playing and how durable you need the shield to actually be. On the overall edge, or overall shield everywhere, 2 to 3 coats. I generally do 5 to 6 on the edge, being that that is where it takes the most damage. It's where it gets hit the most. It's where it gets dropped on the most, rolls around. The thicker edge of foam that you, or Plastidip that you have up there, the better. The longer lasting it's gonna be. So normally between every coat, because we're going to do the front, we're going to do the back, we're going to do the front, we're going to do the back, the last stage of every coat is to come back over this outside edge. Meaning that gravity is going to drop those the excess amount that you have here. Towards the end, you want to go around the outside edge so that you don't have a bunch of pools on the bottom, little drip marks that harden up looking like drip marks. Like those. Occasionally get a bunch that drip off my brush like that if I have too much on the brush. Don't want to do that. As you go around, if you see any areas that look like they're particularly thin on the top, throw another coat up on top of it. If you can, underneath where you're working, so you can catch some of that stuff that's dropping off. And then one thing you can do to help it thin out a lot nicer is while it's still wet, I'm going to do a coat of the spray over the top of it, and the extra toluene in the spray, because there's a lot more thinning agent in the spray than there is in the paint. Just going over it real quick will help it self-level even more. Throw a little bit more up in this crack here. Get a glimpse of that. Okay, see the Once this side is dry, I'm going to flip it over, do the other side, and we'll keep going from there. Okay, so here it is a couple hours later. The first coat's still not fully set up, but it's close enough that I can turn it over onto a nice flat piece. I've got a piece of MC here that I'm laying it down onto so it doesn't damage it or anything. So that I can start on the next coat. That way the whole thing can cure overnight. So I'm in my workshop now because it's nighttime. A little bit cooler, so I got my heater going, and we're just going to do like we did before. Only this time I'm going to start on the inside. If you put a center grip into it, you want to make sure you Plastidip inside that whole area really well. So I'm just going to get in there, drop a bunch down the walls, side walls, so that it makes a really good connection on the inside. Really well. Nice that coat hold that whole inner spot together really well. I mean that we taped all those up really well after we've let the Plastidip cure. We'll have to come back through with razor blades and cut into the Plastidip because some of it's going to adhere to this tape and to whatnot, and then we can pull the tape off. The Plastidip won't adhere as strongly to the leather as it does to the tape, so the leather will be unaffected. Now, being that we've got a strap shield, the arm strap and the hand strap, so this strap here and this strap area, underneath them we're going to want to make sure that we've got really thick layers of Plastidip so that it's got a really thick surface, because that's the part that's going to be rubbed on the most by her arm when she's using this. So to keep it and make sure that it doesn't peel off at any point in time just from use, you want to make sure it's got really thick coats. So on those coats, I'm going to make sure to have at least 4 to 5 coats of this paint underneath those areas. Nice and thick. Now if you do this with just 2 coats, you can get away with doing probably 2 cans on a medium-sized shield. If you want to go up to the 4 to 6 coats to make it really super durable, if you're playing a high contact sport with shield kicking and shield bashing and rubbing, I would highly suggest that. Then you're going to probably double that, 4 or 5 cans of the paint on version. This shield, she only does light combat LARPing, so the most rubbing she's probably going to have is the section right here where her arm goes. That'll have the most effect on her combat. once again, go around the outside. Well, I'm going to let it dry overnight. Set it up here on the bench. Maybe even let it hang, and then we'll see how it turns out tomorrow. Do another coat or two, and then we'll be on to the painting stage. Okay, so what we've done now, I've gone through, finished up the Plastidip. Then I took some blue painter's tape and masked off all the areas on the inside here that are going to be one color, or this will be like the wood grain effect where the blue tape is now. And I'm wanting to get the symbol and the outside ring, and then these pieces right here, the red base coat of the primary color that I'm going to use with the airbrush, and then I'm going to use this portion and do a paintbrush in here for detail work. I found that if I'm using the Creatix airbrush paint here with my airbrush, it tends to grip onto the Plastidip really well. Oh, before we do that, I want to get a piece of sandpaper and just lightly scuff up the Plastidip. So I've got some very fine sandpaper. This is a 220 grit, just little pieces. I'm just going to come through and buff it. It's actually going to make it almost look like it's getting dirty. That's just buffing off that little edge. This will allow the paint to grip the Plastidip just a little bit better, and it will last pretty well. So I don't know if you can see that here. See how it's going from being nice and shiny over here, and it's just putting some light buffing into it. Oop. So we'll do that for the whole piece, and then the reason I do airbrush, number one, is the airbrushing is a lot easier, but I like to airbrush the outside edge on the ring here because the airbrush paint goes on a lot thinner and adheres quite a bit better than the paint on, from my experience. And since the edge is the one that gets hit the most from blocking shots, that's the one that you want it to be the best paint. So I generally start with the, there we go, the red, or the outside edge first, paint it up, and then go to doing the main pieces, or the main body of the piece with the brush on, and get all the detail work. Okay, so here, just about got the first coat done on the top layer. I'm going to let this dry and turn it over and do the back side. And then I'm going to attempt to do some highlighting and shading and turning this red color to make it look like it's flame. Okay, so we've got the front side has dried, and we've got the first coat on the outside edge. So I'm going to do the back rim here and the handle area. Turn it sideways. I didn't paint this bottom section, so it's not wet, so I can turn it sideways here and do this. next we'll try some highlights. Okay, so I finished all the painting up. Right now we're going to go ahead and remove all the masking tape so that we can paint the wood grain area here. One of the reasons that I masked it so well, let's see if I can show you this. You see all that paint that I've got on the blue masking tape now? As soon as that comes off, we just got the black area underneath it, and being that she wants the main area black, saves me a lot of time in painting, hopefully. So I can just go through and touch up around the edges with black paint and then seal the black Plastidip straight up. And here we have the back taken off. Now I left all the masking tape on all the strapping that I'm using because we're still going to end up spraying it with a clear coat over the top. So we want to leave those on until after the clear coat's done. Then we'll take those off. So we're getting pretty close. So now I'm going to go through and with some black, this is Liquitex Basics paint. I am going to go and do some touch-ups where the masking tape that we used to cut off didn't get quite there. Do this on both the front and the back. And then we shall be ready for the seal coat. Okay, so we're going to put the clear coat. I am using I'm using the Criston Clear Gloss, and it's a spray paint. Seems to work pretty good. A lot of other people use Through the Roof and a couple of other similar products, but the Criston seems to work just fine for me, and it's a lot cheaper than some of these others. Ooh, that looks kind of cool. Kind of an almost marbled effect. So I'm going to let that coat dry. Actually, we'll let that dry for a few minutes and flip it over and do the others, and we are just about done. And now I'm going to spray the other side. And there you have it. Let that dry. We can take off the tape on the back side and we'll be done. Okay, so now all the clear coat's dried, so what we're going to do is start taking off all of the masking tape off the strapping on the back side. Now I've got a lot of extra strapping here for all the different pieces that we've got coming in for her scabbards and sheaths and stuff. So very carefully peel all that tape off that I put to keep the leather straps from getting covered in Plastidip. Now as I get down close to the end here, let me get closer. You can see, I don't know if you can see, the strapping tape, or the masking tape is covered right at the end where Plastidip is covered over. So it's kind of connecting it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in around this edge here really lightly, making sure not to cut into the leather, but to just cut through the Plastidip that has attached itself around there at the bottom so that I can peel all that tape away. So we're going to do that for the whole thing and add our connection pieces and we'll be done.